Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of Mystery Explorer. My name's Andrew and I'm sitting here with Sean. Hey man, how's it going?
Hello, good.
And the subject tonight is the Georgia Guidestones. And I picked this subject because out of most of all these things, this is the one of these actual topics and places that you and I have actually been to together, right?
Yeah, because it's right here in Georgia. We expected it to be kind of a roadside attraction, but it wasn't even that when we got there. It's just the town of Elberton, and then a few miles outside of that, nothing, and in the middle of that nothing, the Georgia Guidestones. Most of these kind of places, you expect there to be at least like a gift shop or something, but when you go out there, there's nothing. You will go up this little road and I want to say it's like a little gravel road. It's not even like you leave the pavement, and
yeah, it was like there's 100 feet off the road. Yeah,
4 parking spaces and the Guidestones right there. And nothing else. There's nothing to explain it except that there's the capstone, I think, says what it is, but there's no price of admission. There's no gift shop. Nothing. The only thing that even gives any explanation of it is if you're driving through Elberton, the Elberton Museum has some exhibits that explain a little bit about what the Guidestones are, and the history of why it's there, and not that anybody technically knows who built it. But
what is the thing about that statue that was buried, the old Chappie or old...
Duchy.
Yeah. What is
Duchy was the statue. Yeah, because the whole idea of Duchy was back in this
Duchy, yeah.
Elberton is like the self-proclaimed granite capital of the world. That's
right.
I mean, that's part of the mystery of how the Guidestone's in there, because it's a big Stonehenge-like structure that's made fully out of granite, and Elberton is this massive mecca of granite production. So that's sort of the tie-in of how this happens, but...
And we kind of didn't mention what the Guidestones are. It's basically like a modern-day Stonehenge with a lot of we'll get into the details of it, but it's like a Stonehenge with carvings in it. And
yeah, there's some lore as to exactly why they had it built and what they wanted, and Stonehenge was in their minds. Like, It's not by accident. They wanted it to be an American kind of Stonehenge, but we'll get into the story of that. But Duchy was, along the history of weird granite monuments that have been built in and around Elberton. At one point, they had built a Confederate War memorial.
Right.
And the statue was built, and I don't remember.
It's just really creepy.
There's a whole
looking.
history.
Well,
they thought it
looking.
looked like a Dutch trader.
Right.
That's why they nicknamed it Duchy, and they didn't think that it was a proper Confederate soldier. So this also paints a little bit of the history and culture of the surrounding area too. The fact that it was not acceptable to be their Confederate War memorial.
Right. This is
so they tore it down, dug a hole, and just buried it in the ground.
Yeah, this is deep south we're in right now too, but the thing about that, what was kind of it kind of popped the bubble a little for me when you go to that museum and you realize that it is like the granite capital of the South, all that stuff, and the amount of, and then with the Duchy thing too, it's like it goes from like, why is this thing out in the middle of nowhere? What a mystery! And then then you get to a town where they have so much granite that they can just burn on all these different projects. You're like, oh, that might be a motivation. Yeah, there might be a motivation why that's there now. It's like,
Well, I thought when we went there and saw that, I thought, well, then the answer is simple. This is just this is just to get publicity because they're the granite capital of the world.
Oh, yeah,
so
I
they
never
build
thought
this
of that
giant
angle.
monolith
Cool, yeah.
out there. But there is a weirder story to it because it's not just a blank slate kind of Stonehenge structure like Stonehenge is. Like, it was created with a message, and that's why probably that people still take an interest in the Guidestones, because otherwise it's kind of a curiosity. But what ends up keeping it in I don't know that I wouldn't say the public eye, but what keeps it coming up,
the History Channel's eye.
There's a certain amount of controversy that surrounds the history and purpose of the Guidestones.
Let's dig into the history then, actually, about from the beginning. We'll spill our other stories in as we go from it.
Okay, well, it was commissioned in 1979. by a man who called himself R.C. Christian. This was not his real name. This was admittedly, at the time, not his real name. It was a pseudonym that he had adopted because he wanted the Guidestones to have an air of mystery. He wanted to create something that nobody knew where it came from. So he worked a deal with the head of the bank at that time, and they knew who he was, but no one else did. And so they brokered the whole deal with him, and he sent them all the money, and they worked with the granite people in the town to actually build it to his specifications. And what he wanted was, and this they talk about in the book, and we'll talk about his book a little bit later, and in some of the documentaries, if you do watch a couple documentaries about it, they mention also it's sort of critical to remember that this was around the time that the tensions between the U.S. and the Soviet Union were coming to a head, and the nuclear crisis was, like, if you're my age, which is, 40-something, then you remember as a kid being afraid of there being literal nuclear war. Like, both sides were going on Cold War's in full swing, and we just thought any minute someone's gonna push the button one way or the other, and that's gonna be it. And that's sort of the climate that this idea arose from, where they're like, well, if we do blow ourselves up, let's erect a monument to whatever comes next, that maybe they'll build a better society. And this is where the controversy of the message comes in. But that's the sort of context that it came out of. We want to build it out of stone because we know that those will last forever. Stonehenge being their sort of example. It's not the only one, but the most famous one of these kind of memorials that just survive forever. But they don't have any message. So their idea was, we're going to make Stonehenge, but we're going to inscribe it with a message on how to do better in the future. And they had that message written on all the stones in several different prominent languages, so that I guess whoever was left and found themselves in Elberton, Georgia.
It's sort of like a commandments, sort of, right? And we'll go through them, but it's sort of the commandments of the thing, right? Yeah.
And they build it like a Rosetta Stone, where it's the same message on all of these stones. So if you know any of these prominent old Earth languages, then you'll get the gist on any of them. Because there were some things where they built it where it would align like Stonehenge with the stars, so we could realign this with the North Star, or we could rebuild the calendar system with this. This will actually serve as a clock as well, so we can just rebuild all of those basic systems and structures based on the design of the Guidestones. And it has these commandment style messages, because it is, I don't remember how many inscriptions are on there, but it does have just a series of messages that humanity is supposed to follow.
Right.
Let's see. I got the book here. Let me dig it up. We'll find them.
And they're 8 or 10, aren't they?
It's something like that, because it's fashioned after the idea of the 10 Commandments, but I don't think it's literally 10.
Oh, and also the background of the thing is like, so whenever we look at all this, paranormal stuff, we're always like, or whatever, this isn't paranormal. It's like, but mysterious stuff. Like, this was sort of like a roller coaster of, like, you look up what these actual commandment things or messages are, because you'll see as we start going over them, you're like, okay, and then halfway towards the end of the list, you're like, well, that's a little dark. I don't know how that's gonna happen, but then it's like, because in general these are not bad, like, ominous things, except for one of these items.
They didn't want it to be. What's funny is it's the number one is the worst one. Like, they don't even ease into it. Like, they lean into it. Is it the first one? And it is 10 rules, actually. Okay. Yeah, the very first one, because what the top stone above them all says, "Let these be guidestones to an age of reason,"
which is fine. That's great.
All for reason. One hopes that we will establish that through the course of this program. We're all about some reason on this. But it's the particular steps that people had a problem with. And this is where, and this is true around the time that you and I were there, was a lot of the flap was going on, because there was a lot of heavy graffiti on the stones when we visited it.
Right.
Because a lot of these InfoWars type sites got hold of it, including specifically InfoWars, and we're just like, this is it. This is what they're doing. This is what they want.
Oh, this is like a globalist thing, as they say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh God, we could talk about it because there's some dopey stuff that gets attached to these rocks, but
I mean, it smells of Illuminati kind of. If you were inclined to that,
yeah, but secret societies don't build giant stone monoliths to tell you what they're doing in secret. That doesn't make any sense. So let's see. They actually do have 10 commandments here. So number 1 is the one that most people have the most problem with. Maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature.
So just let's be objectively reading that. Like, you could say, well, maybe that is a balance with nature. That's our problem. But that's a little that's a little harsh. That's a low number compared to what we have.
Well, that's what everyone's problem is. They think that they apply it to now. They're saying that most of the people on the earth will have to be wiped out. It's like, hold on. First of all, a tiny percentage of the Earth's population isn't going to be able to wipe out the majority of all other humans.
Right.
So calm down. Second, like we said in context, what they were really thinking about in terms
of like apocalyptic.
Their thought is that we already don't have that many people left on the Earth.
Right. And that makes sense. From that, it's like, hey, not saying that we need to bring it down, but if something happened and was down, let's not make the same mistake again and get to be 10 billion people.
Yeah, let's get a handle on that. But a lot of alarmists will sit there and go, they want to kill us all. It's like, who's they? It's rocks. There's no they. This is just a rock in the middle of nowhere. Like, nobody's doing anything. The extent of their wealth went into the creation of this, just so they could communicate that idea.
Well, and once we dig into some of the materials too, you'll see that, like, if this is that big of a secret, some of this stuff in correspondence that's available now, if people want to get a hold of it, they could. You know what I mean? It's not like locked up tight. Some of these secret so it's this isn't some kind of crazy Illuminati.
Yeah, you could follow the money here, just nobody needs to. It's fine.
And it's also a little undercutting, too, when even if you don't know, because we know the RC Christian guy did this, and this jumps towards later on, they talk about stuff they want to build, additions to it and stuff, and he's haggling over the price of it. I'm like, Illuminati groups don't haggle over the price of things.
Well, and that's the whole thing. Like, he had a whole plan. Well, honestly, they wanted to build it someplace else and built it in Elberton because it was cheaper.
Cheaper, yeah, because it's right there at the core, yeah.
Just the physics of the way it was put together. I mean, the fact that they went to Elberton, they're already trying to get wholesaler prices on granite, and these guys normally only sell to we sell to contractor companies. We don't just sell to some guy who wants some granite. We're not a retailer. So you're already trying to cut out the middleman and get a better deal.
And correct me if I'm mistaken, though, like the way it seemed to sound in that documentary is that now it's like they bought it, the land, but then it's like the city owns it, though, right?
They do now. You're talking about Dark Clouds over Elberton, the documentary.
But just in general, just that fact is that they own, it's like the city is in charge of it, though.
Yeah, it was left in their care after it was built.
What I mean,
they maintain it. Which is another thing. When you're out there, throwing polyurethane paint on it to stick it to the Bilderbergs, it's the tiny city of Elberton has to come clean it.
And that's why you have to go because it's like they couldn't. If you think about it, and you couldn't get, because to convince the city to take over this thing, it had to be a person to person kind of. You go any town size bigger than this, they're like, no. Why do we do that? Like, what? You know what I mean? Like, you want to give us land? That's we'll tear it down, build a parking lot. If you want to do that.
And that's sort of if you watch Dark Clouds over Elberton, which is a decent. We can talk about it a little bit more in detail as to it's got some pros and cons to it.
This, yeah.
But it's on Amazon, so you can see it,
free,
and it is a neat story. They lay out a lot of interesting information, but the Wyatt Martin, who was the president of the bank at the time when RC Christian came, he's interviewed a lot on that one and a couple other documentaries, because I think Noah Brown has a documentary, which is I think it's only on Vimeo.
Okay.
But we should put up some links to these because you can see them. You don't have to pay for them. It's on Vimeo for free, and I think it's. It might just be called the Guidestones. Yeah, that's what it's called, and it's a pretty good one. And he talks to Wyatt Martin in it, and then Dark Clouds Over Elberton, they also talk to Wyatt Martin, and that's where a lot of this background information comes from. So it doesn't come off as sinister when you're just talking to this affable old guy who's just talking about when they built this rock thing. But he dealt directly with them. He knew who he was. It wasn't like a big secret. Like I'm sure it would be legal records that could be obtained, but it doesn't matter. It's not publicly known, but it's not secret in the strictest sense either.
Yeah, because there hasn't been some kind of crazy. It's just like there's not locked in a vault somewhere or something like this stuff. It's like just random. And it kind of the only mystery that kind of comes from that from that documentary is sort of the insinuation that guy does know stuff that when he dies, stuff will be released.
You're talking about Wyatt Martin?
Yeah, Wyatt. Yeah, because he kind of implies that because he's always very careful not to say anything, but he does kind of say, they're like, "Well, do you think it'll ever come out?" He's like, "Yeah, it will."
Well, what's interesting to me about it is if you watch Dark Clouds Over Elberton, they talk to that guy a lot, and he's sworn to secrecy. You can tell he's an old man with a story, though. He wants to tell everybody as much of the story as his honor will allow, because it's a fun story for people to come around and ask about every now and then. But He also promised that he would never reveal the identity of R.C. Christian, and he didn't. Right. Now, they do some stuff in Dark Clouds Over Elberton where they kind of trick him into showing them some stuff where they're trying to sneak away, and they do end up they purloin some interesting information from those exchanges that he probably didn't mean to. And they follow up on it, which is,
it pays off.
And it's very interesting stuff. Yeah,
it pays off, and I'm actually convinced that's the guy. So it's like, when you watch it, you're like,
I think they cracked it.
But they kind of just did it they kind of took advantage of an old man.
Yeah,
I think,
and they did it in bad faith.
What year was that made?
Dark Clouds Over Elberton was made in 2015. Is the release date
so that's
on
pretty
that?
Close.
What's interesting about that is it must have been shot earlier than that, though, because Noel Brown, who did the Guidestones documentary, he did that in 2013, and he talks to Wyatt Martin also, but in his documentary, Wyatt Martin says, I'm never going to reveal this information, and he pulls out the same computer case that we see in Dark Clouds Over Elberton that supposedly has all of the secret information that must never be shared. But at the end of the Guidestones documentary, he takes it out and burns it all. That's how that movie ends. And they sort of leave it as, and now no one will ever know. But now we're seeing there's a gap in the story where clearly these Dark Clouds Over Elberton guys talked to him before that, and he may have thought, maybe don't let people see this, and he went out and burned it after that. We'll never know for sure. I don't think that the extent of that, but if you watch those two together, they have differing narratives, but you can tell that they're from around the same time period. And you have the one filmmaker who says, well, he didn't want to reveal that information, so we'll never know. And there's actually a shorter video called Etched in Secret that is on YouTube where they talk to Noel Brown much later, and he sort of talks a little bit about making that film, and he doesn't call Dark Clouds Over Elberton out directly, but he kind of says, he took those pages and he burned them, and I filmed him burning them, and I could have tried to get a look at one of the names on those papers, but I respected that they wanted that kept a mystery and a secret. And that seems after seeing all the movies, a little bit of a dig at the people that made the Elberton documentary.